What's up, guys? Welcome back to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Nvidia stock, ticker symbol NVDA, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Friday, March 1st. Alright guys, well, nice little day for Nvidia stock here, up $14.49 a share, 1.87%. The majority of that happening in pre-market and then holding that move into the close. The stock is up about 5.5 points after hours. Listen, you guys know what I always say, right? If you've been watching for any period of time, if you're new here, please subscribe to the channel. My goal is to hit 3,000 subs by the end of the day tomorrow, and that's certainly not going to happen without your guys' help, but I think we can do it. So jump aboard if you haven't already, and I appreciate it. But you guys know what I always say. Listen, if I'm a bull, right, I'd prefer that it's up $5 or $6 after hours than flat or down. But we have to take the move with a grain of salt. Be responsible about it, right? Because volume is so incredibly low. Okay, the real test is really going to be the open, but it is the real price, right? So I'd rather have it be up than flat or down. But let's get started on this thing here by starting on the 5-minute chart and going through our daily ritual of volume profile analysis. Now we have this big volume candle after hours that's going to kind of throw things off. I really wish there was a way to just remove this so we could make the rest of it larger and really analyze what's going on here in a better way. But we can see enough here. So what's interesting is we saw this downside move, right? And we actually saw that get a little bit of pop in volume. However, it popped, the volume more so, it kind of capped out in equal parts on the both bottoming candles, and one was red and one was of course green. And then we kind of descended in the same way that volume ascended on the rebound. So I have to call that kind of a wash. And in terms of the rest of the volume, like off the open or into the close, it really is all contextual based on what we would expect based on time of day. So honestly, that's about enough here around the 5-minute. Let's move on, not waste any time here. On the 30-minute, we're going to take a look at levels that I'm paying attention to tomorrow. We, of course, have the ever so important self-fulfilling prophecy indicators here, the most popular ones, the 200 period and the 50 period. Only interested in the psychology behind them. They're, of course, not magic. However, when people believe that they work and they make decisions around them, all of a sudden, you have to pay attention to them. Now, we talked about this yesterday, and we did reclaim both of these today, and just about in the best way possible. We got both of these curling upside at a more aggressive rate, the 50 period going from a downtrend here to curling now upside, and the 200 period accelerating its upside move, kind of meeting in the middle here after hours, which is great. In my experience, it doesn't double the strength of the level, but it typically adds, if I had to guess, somewhere around like 50% strength. At least that's what it seems to add when we see retests. So listen, tomorrow, really simple here on the 30-minute. If we do see a retest of both the 50 period and the 200 period, or if one crosses over, whichever one's first, ideally, obviously, you'd want to see a hold and a high volume bounce up away from that level, back up toward $800 a share. But I think the better scenario, if you're a bull here on Nvidia heading into tomorrow, is that these two just continue their aggressive move upside, get up through 790, head up toward 8, and really add a psychological downside barrier to help push the stock up through $800 a share. All right. Now, the 4-hour chart, let's take a look. You can see here that on the 4-hour, the 50 period is going to, here, let's zoom out a little bit. The 50 period is going to take its time because it is a little bit longer time frame. So you can see not a whole lot of wiggle going on there, but it did move upside, probably $6-7 a share, which is a relatively good move. I always want these things getting feet up under, because we had this big move off of Nvidia earnings, of course, and we need feet getting up underneath the move. I always say that, and I want it to happen quickly on all the time frames, but I accept it's always going to be a little slower the longer time frame you go, 4-hour, and then the daily is even slower here. So listen, really simple on the 4-hour, nothing complicated about this. Just would love to see this continue upside, get up towards 765, maybe even 770 here. If you're a bear, obviously, you would want to see a downside test. Understand that is approximately 4.8% away to the downside, so that would be a larger move. But we've, of course, seen Nvidia do crazier things because, bears, you're really looking for a downside clean break, at least on the 4-hour of that 50 period heading down towards 750. But bulls, you just want that thing moving higher, ideally without a retest, but in the case of a retest, high volume bounce. Now, let's move on to the most contextual, most important, most heavily watched chart of all, the daily. Now remember, the daily's not going to show after hour movement. It is up after hours a bit. But the daily is always my favorite to look at because it allows us to just say, okay, what's the most obvious thing going on here? And you guys remember yesterday we were talking about 750, 800, 800 bucks a share, 825, right? The all-time high. But the obvious story here has now kind of changed. Really simple. Bulls. A reclaim of 800 bucks a share tomorrow would be beautiful. Get up through, even if we see a retest, use 800 as a high volume trampoline to push us up through 825. That would be the best case scenario tomorrow for bulls, aside from just like a moonshot to 1,000 off of some unexpected news or something crazy. But that would be tremendous. Bears, one objective tomorrow. Any test of 800, make sure the stock fails. That's what you're looking for at least. And make sure it does so on at least average volume. A failure to reclaim 800 to me doesn't mean all that much unless volume is at least average, if not above average. So bears, you would want to see a rejection off 8 on high volume heading down towards 750. Implied volatility on the name is actually coming down at a pretty sustained rate here. You can see we're back down at 42.4%. Right around earnings, it was up towards 66%-ish. So options traders understand that the lower that goes, right, and stockholders also, it's important to look at IV for a gauge on how the options traders are seeing the stability of the stock at the current level. The lower IV goes, the more attractive it becomes for new options buyers to purchase options, right? Because they may be expecting a bounce back up toward equilibrium, whatever equilibrium in IV is in their relevant or intended trade time frame. What I mean by that is, like, you wouldn't compare where IV is in the last 3 years if you're looking to take an options trade for 3 days. You would compare it to the last week or so, right? In the same way, if IV, dumped in the last 2 days, you wouldn't go and say, oh, it must be a great time to buy leaps for a year out without considering where IV was over the last year or two. Contextual, context is always the name of the game here. And also stockholders, the lower IV goes, quite literally, the more comfortable options traders see the stock at the current price, which if the stock is higher and you're a bull, it would be I would think a good thing. You would want the options traders to see the stock as more comfy up at your higher level if you're a bull. So speaking of all the options traders, let's take a look at what they had to say here today. 1.17 million total contracts traded, 691,000 calls, 479,000 puts. So we are seeing call side bias here on the overall ratio today. The short-term speculators leaning slightly to the bearish side, 207,000 calls and 236,000 puts. But in all reality, that was the only delta range that the bears won here. You start going toward at the money and then especially deeper in the money, and the bulls take over. It's call side bias on 4 out of 5 of those delta ranges here on Nvidia today, leaning to that, relatively substantial call bias on the overall call put ratio on big volume, which makes it a good sample size. Listen, got value out of that video, please subscribe. Again, hoping to hit 3,000 by the, I suppose, midnight tomorrow night, or I suppose that would be Saturday morning. So if you'd like to help us get there, hop aboard. I'll keep providing as much value as I possibly can here. By the way, if you haven't heard yet, I recently added a benefit that's included with every membership that goes Gold, Gold Plus UOA, and Platinum one-on-one. I'm now alerting in-play stocks as they come into play. These are stocks that have the attention of a huge majority of momentum traders because, listen, as momentum traders, I think we all kind of end up looking for the same thing because we all end up realizing that certain parameters, certain elevated relative volume, certain market caps, certain liquidity, a certain amount of volume in a particular price range, typically to keep bid-ask spreads tight, fresh news catalyst. I think most momentum traders come to the conclusion that there's the most edge in those kind of names. So here, what happens is stocks start to move on a catalyst typically. And momentum traders, myself included, we all run to the popular piece of equipment on the playground for a small period of time, trade it, and then it typically fades. Okay, the traders lose interest and we move on to the next thing. But during that period of time, if you're just the better trader, there is tremendous edge as long as risk management is carried out very well. You're very fast scalper mentality, right? I'm not buying and holding these kind of stocks. They're risky. But with the proper risk management in place, I do have edge. And since I'm trading primarily against just humans and way less algorithms than a stock like Apple, for example, just being the better trader is good enough in my experience to procure that edge. Now, I got questions all the time, like how do I find these stocks? And I was trying to always give free answers. The problem is the free answers are typically a little slow, and the scanners that like professional grade traders are using, they're expensive. I spend a lot of money on scanners every month. So I added this on as a benefit, included with all the other benefits that each tier gets. Hope to see you join. It's at that first link, or I guess the only link in the pinned comment. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.